practitioners of the craft, was good. My name is Neil K. Marcellus, and welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of Gameology. Yeah, that's checkmate. As this thumbnail for this episode is demonstrating, a lot of guys will go over the top and do some outlandish things in the attempt in getting their foot into the door at making a positive impression when attempting to meet a female for the very first time. This irregular and wacky way of approaching females can be basically summed up by what a seasoned OG said to me one time, and that is, tricks, well mastered, are called techniques. Techniques that is poorly learned and taken out of context are merely tricks. In other words, the problem behind why a lot of men would approach a female in a wacky and corny type of way is because they have shoved a bunch of erroneous pickup lines and parlor tricks up their sleeves, thinking that this is the proper way to go about things. But as that OG who passed along that pearl of wisdom I just shared with you further said to me, and that is, instead of having just a bunch of parlor tricks up one sleeve, level up and implement one of the several aspects of choice. Remember, a practicing gameologist has 6 kinds of choices to choose from. But he said level up and implement the power of choice, which is the equivalent of having an ace up one sleeve. Instead of a bunch of cliche gobbledygook that produces an unfavorable reaction in females when trying to get to know them. And so, the concept of the ace, metaphorically, being up one sleeve, it represents the capacity for a man to be creative and resourceful in his approach at flirting and getting at the ladies. Case in point, in Will Smith 2005 movie Hitch, in this clip I'm getting ready to comment on, Will Smith plays a smooth operator who is very efficient at getting at the ladies. In this clip, there's a female that catches his eye in this club, but she is already surrounded by a bunch of hardheads. So he pushes his way through the melee and he slides her a $20 bill and requests that she brings him a drink, implying that she's a waitress. This was his ace up his sleeve in order to get her away from all of those hardheads. And afterwards, she approaches him and he reveals his true intentions. And she becomes very intrigued and very impressed. But passing it back to the connotations and the remarks making up the title for this episode and what it implies, and that is, there are 4 mistakes or 4 massive fundamental principles that encompasses a man being efficient and being flirtatious and getting at the ladies. But these 4 fundamental principles fall up under a greater philosophy, which is referred to from a street perspective as the art of verbal chess, which is the body of knowledge making up the methods and procedures on developing one's mouthpiece. But peep game, having a thorough mouthpiece from an authentic street and game perspective, one does not possess a functional and thorough mouthpiece just to be efficient in flirting and making a positive impression upon the females. Having a thorough mouthpiece from an authentic street perspective is all about having an all-purpose mechanism, which is the art of verbal chess. But this mechanism is to be used in every facet in every aspect of one's life, in every situation that that individual will encounter. This mandatory mandate that I just pointed out, where a man who is true to the culture, this philosophy, referred to as the concept of game. But this mandatory mandate that says a mouthpiece be developed so it can be utilized in all scenarios in life stands in stark opposition to the game goofy point of view where a semblance of what looks like a mouthpiece is only used to flirt and try to make a positive impressions upon the ladies. This view is pushed heavily by the culture vultures, who has only a tabloid version of comprehension when it comes to this craft and this street art referred to as the concept of game. Pure and simple, an actionable mouthpiece is multifunctional, whereas the game goofy point of view is considered to be just one-dimensional, like an instrument that can only be utilized in one particular way. And more times than not, the corny advocates of how to approach women usually fail poorly at even doing that, primarily because of these four fundamental principles I'm getting ready to expose to you. Bearing that in mind as to what I just stated, which is an actionable mouthpiece is multifunctional. The four attributes that facilitate this kind of dexterity, which also metaphorically represents having the ace up one sleeve. Check out this new image that I'm currently showing you now. But these four attributes are as such. Number 1, spontaneity. Number 2, non-telegraphic mannerism. Number 3, anxiety control. And finally, number 4, zone awareness. And if you've been noticing, in conjunction with the chess analogies, I added the correlation of poker. Just like chess, poker has many fundamental truths that correlate and can be applied to real life scenarios. For instance, in poker, you increases your knowledge of finance, which is money management when it comes to playing poker. Through poker, one's knowledge of applied mathematics increases as well. Because in poker, this is understood by understanding probability and how to calculate the odds. Also, one's knowledge of social dynamics, i.e. human nature, increases as well. Because within the game of poker, this is understood by being cooperative with other players. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, when it's time in order to get down and dirty, how to be sneaky and deceitful. And this last point that I just made is the reason they say that poker is a zero-sum game. Because those who play and who is unskilled ends up every time with the sum of their money they started off with, eventually ending in zero. Also, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and as well share this video like I said many times before. It would definitely do me a solid. Now, from a gameologist angle, a truth that is embedded into this poker saying and adage that I'm about to share with you that goes, play the man and not the cards. This right here increases a man's mouthpiece to be multifunctional, because the truth embedded into that quote I just shared with you implies that one exercise the skill and insight to conceive what might be. In other words, the ability to read and translate nonverbal communication into actionable on-the-spot information that can be used for a man or by a man in order to be more efficient at being flirtatious with the ladies and every other endeavor that he runs into, whether having to do with pitching a business proposal to a potential business partner or having a difficult but necessary conversation with a family member or a close friend. Like I said, it's all about having a mouthpiece that is multifaceted and multifunctional. Swinging back to the outlandish and quirky ways that a lot of men has grown accustomed to in their attempts and efforts at being flirtatious and getting at the ladies, but a crucial and important box that needs to be checked in a man's approach when he steps into the females, and that is a concept referred to as a man's edge that further gives him options to guide her to the next level after the flirtatious period has ended. And this edge that I just got through mentioning is a man's uniqueness that he brings to the table. So the issue becomes a large percentage of men forfeit and lose too much of their uniqueness just in their approach. And not to mention the steps a man wants to explore once the flirting is over. Now, the next logical question would be, why do things go downhill and sideways with women when this edge is missing and out to lunch, so to speak, and is nowhere to be found? Now, once again, peep game. It happens because so many men are just repetitive and ordinary, meaning that the females that they are approaching have basically seen the same old playbook many times before, which indicates and translates to her, if you are this type of man that falls under this category, is that you are just like the other guys that needs or wants something just like the 100 other hardheads that came before you. And by all means, I'm not saying that one needs to be at the level of uniqueness that matches someone like Sugar Free from out of Los Angeles, who is a hip hop legend and a triple OG and a grandmaster when it comes to the application of Gameology. But he is the walking embodiment of what being charismatic and unique looks like. The example of this type of uniqueness, like an individual like Sugar Free, is to point out also the different stages and degrees when it comes to this concept. As long as an individual develop this concept authentically, then that's what counts. So this uniqueness and the power it provides can be cultivated by a concept called a crucible. You can think of this as being somewhat like a pressure cooker. Therefore, from the perspective of the philosophy of Gameology, a man's attributes and his innate qualities must be cultivated and refined within this concept referred to as a crucible, or a pressure cooker, if you will, which I will further elaborate and make more clearly here in a moment. And this requirement on a man being unique is exactly why this concept called game, from an authentic street point of view, does not require a man to implement any corny pickup lines and some parlor tricks or any other aggressive strongman tactics in order to get a female to comply or to give him some attention. Authentic street game is a multifaceted system where attributes are built into techniques and then built into adaptable formulas which can be applied and utilized in all situations. This is the power of having an authentic street philosophy. Now, a man's uniqueness is brought forth by stewing in this concept referred to as a crucible, or a pressure cooker, once again, if you will, which then provides him the ability to utilize this other concept referred to as being in the zone, which is a state of mind which dramatically and definitely improves a man's mental performance. You can look at it like this. Being in the zone is the telephone booth where Clark Kent steps into and changes his clothes, and Superman springs forth and emerges. Dovetting back to the concept of having an ace up one's sleeve and those four massive attributes that this concept of having an ace up one's sleeves represents, and as well how the concept of poker enhances a man's game and his overall approach towards life and success. Now, granted, in poker, the value of a man's poker hand depends entirely upon the situation. For instance, in absolute terms, so in poker, a full house can be equivalent to holding precious gold in one's hand. But it is worthless if the opponent sitting across from the table from you have cards that is stronger than yours. This kind of sudden and unexpected scenarios requires a man to possess an on-the-spot adaptability mindset, which helps him in being more efficient at flirting with the ladies and everything else. So a thorough poker player must develop a concise awareness, a Jedi type capability that provides him the insight into his own cards and many other situational factors such as his opponent's skills, playing style, and body language. All of what I just stated is what is required to be street savvy and possess a multifunctional mouthpiece. Going back to this concept referred to as the crucible or the pressure cooker, the uneasiness of pressure is part of the price that one pays for success upon this chessboard we call life. All gameologists in some shape, form, or fashion in poker and in life learn to accept this reality and the price that comes along with it, even though they might wholeheartedly dislike it. So, let me now divulge how a man can start developing these four attributes and as a result develop his edge, which in all actuality gives him his uniqueness. All of this is accomplished by how efficiently a man can manage his ability to operate within the zone. And the definition from a gameologist perspective as what constitutes this concept, which enhances a man's uniqueness, which is his power to get into the zone, is the mindset that makes the man receptive and open to take into consideration the known and the unknown factors of a situation he is contending with. Check out this fresh image I'm currently showing you. The development of a man's uniqueness, his edge, is predicated and hinges on the concise mixture of the right proportionality and percentage of his pressure to game development ratio, which by the way can only be attained by trial and error. There are three important factors I want to bring to your undivided attention about this ratio. Number one is the concept of high levels of game versus low levels of pressure, which equates to a man being stagnant. As you can see on this image, the vertical arrow, it represents a man's game development. It has a high point as well as a low point. Now, the horizontal arrow, which represents the crucible or the pressure cooker, which one can think of as being something like resistance, but this as well has a high point and also a low point as well. I'm pointing this out to hammer home that it can never be any development of one's game in an environment where the pressure or resistance is too damn low. Think of it like this. Game can be compared to the blueprint and full potential, which is contained and held within every known seed. Growth from seeds depends on the right type of soil and the right kind of climate conditions. Likewise, game becomes activated because of a combination of those very elements that I just got through mentioning, which in this case is this concept called the crucible or the pressure cooker, if you will. And this explains why so many men are devoid and entirely lacking any kind of insight and knowledge of this philosophy, which is referred to as the concept of game, because they wasn't exposed to the right conditions and the right environments. Now, The second factor I wanted to point out is on the opposite end of the spectrum. Low levels of game versus high levels of resistance and pressure equates to the unproductiveness and onslaught of anxiety. Taking on and tackling certain endeavors and activities can be detrimental to one's psychology when one's game is not up to par and has not undergone properly the development and enhancement that it requires. With that being said, this third factor is where we plunge into the meat and the potatoes of how a man develops his uniqueness. And this is by an indirect involvement of being in this concept called the zone, the sweet spot, where a man achieves this skill set of being into the flow and fluctuations of what's going on around him. This takes place because when his focus is in the present moment, which comes about when his game has been evenly balanced with the right percentage of resistance and pressure. As this image indicates, this is when he attained the ability to get into his zone. And this produces his uniqueness, his edge. Now, one of the best ways I recommend on trying to back engineer a legitimate pressure cooker and create the right kind of resistance that will produce the right kind of pressure, which allows a man to develop this edge, is for a man to take part in mixed martial arts or take up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes. These two activities provide the right kind of ingredients from my experience that will produce a man having a legitimate edge. This concept of a crucible, and one can envision a man stewing inside of a steaming hot pressure cooker. Also, this can be viewed as the hero's journey, in which a man begins his journey out of his ordinary world, which compels him to seek out a precious treasure that only he can discover, which is hidden in a land both of promise and difficulty. Without this difficulty, the man cannot discover his uniqueness. Without risk and challenge, there's no reward and no fulfillment. Slaying dragons, both externally and internally, is all in a day's work for a practicing and a newly emerging gameologist. Getting knocked down reveals the harsh realities of life. Getting back up reveals your intestinal fortitude and your greatness. Let me swing back and emphasize a critical point that needs to be understood when it comes to men being flirtatious and stepping to the ladies. You can equate a man's uniqueness and his ability to be in the zone as the power to be mysterious. And when there is no mystery, then there is no sexual tension that exists between a man and a woman. Now, you should have a thorough comprehension of why these four attributes are so crucial for a man to possess a multifunctional mouthpiece and a better understanding of how resistance and pressure can produce a precious diamond, which is the philosophy of gameology. And to backpedal just a little bit and go back to the chess analogy so I can point out we have just scratched the surface as what it takes to develop a thorough mouthpiece from a gameologist perspective, which is the art of verbal chess. Check out this brand new image I'm showing you now. But this concept of the art of verbal chess has 6 massive categories, starting with the king, which is the knowledge of one's mental state, and next, which is the queen, which is the knowledge of gallantry, cause it is always better in attempting to catch a fly with honey versus vinegar any day. The next chess piece in the lineup is the bishop, and it represents the knowledge of the 4 avenues of influence. The knight represents the knowledge of the 4 verbal styles. And the next chess piece in the lineup is the rook. It represents the knowledge and insight into reading body language. And finally, the pawn. It represents the knowledge of one's delivering capabilities. To conclude, When a man starts his journey for self-discovery, he owes a debt and a payment to that journey. But once he has decided and has pushed all of his chips into the middle of the poker table and he's in it for the long haul, then the journey owes him. Now that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. We'll definitely catch you on the next episode.